Hi, it's Dave Mattson. Welcome to the How to Succeed podcast, a podcast designed to get you to the top and to stay at the top. I've asked some of our worldwide trainers who just excel in helping organizations and people scale to talk to their guests about what does it take to succeed. And we're going to focus in three areas which we call the success triangle: attitudes, behaviors, and techniques. So we're going to peel back the onion and really understand how people think, how they act, and how they behave to get to the top of their game to help you get there too. Let's listen in.
This week, we're talking to a longtime friend and fellow Sandler trainer, Carlos Garrido from Miami, Florida. Carlos has been one of the top trainers and one of the highest producers in the Sandler network for years. But today, we're going to take a little bit of a different twist in our conversation. We won't be talking so much about best practices in sales training and business development, but more about how some of the foundational Sandler principles have led to dramatic changes in his personal life as well as his business life. So, Carlos, welcome to the How to Succeed podcast.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me, Jim. It's a treat to be with you today.
So, by way of introduction, Carlos, give us a little bit of background on you, your history, your business, your life's journey. For starters, you don't sound like you're from Miami.
No, not from Miami. Your ear picked that up well, and you know this. But for anybody who's watching or listening, I was actually born in Manchester, in England, and spent the first 40 years, in Manchester, in England. My mum and dad met in Manchester, England. Actually, my mum's Greek and my dad's Spanish, but they both were in England, and we raised a family in England, and I had a wonderful start to life. England is a fabulous place, and I had a sort of a long career in finance and investment banking, and my last role in that world was actually in in-house investment banking for a big corporate, very big corporate, and they asked me to come to Miami to lead business development activities and M&A for Latin America. This is back in 2009, when every company in the world that was of any particular size would have a BRIC strategy, an emerging market strategy: Brazil, Russia, India, China, BRIC strategy. And really every exec team needed to tell their board what their BRIC strategy was at the time. I'm never quite sure the promise of emerging markets ever really delivered, but you needed to do what you needed to do. So I was asked by the CEO to come and lead business development and M&A licensing activities in Latin America, based out of Miami. In fact, it was actually funny. The CEO, Dave Brennan, actually thought I spoke Spanish. I don't speak Spanish, but that was why I came to mind when he needed somebody in Latin America. And he even said to me, he said, Carlos, you speak Spanish, so you can do this. And I was about to correct him, like, Dave, I don't speak Spanish. And he said, problem is, you're going to have to move to Miami. And I thought, oh, I could learn Spanish. And so I did. And I learned a little Spanish, only a little. Turns out, to do M&A deals in Latin America, their English is better than my Spanish would ever get. So I fancied Miami because, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and Miami Vice, and Miami was a like exciting place to go to with a young family. So I came out to Miami for 3 years, and I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the place. I actually fell in love with America. I'm now an American. When you become an American, they give you a little American flag. Look at that. It lives on my
Look at
desk.
that. Okay.
So I really, I fell in love with America, fell in love with with Miami. And I didn't want to leave. And then there was, for a variety of reasons, I started this business here in Miami, and it was a tough start, but you'll remember that, Jim. Tough start, but once you push through, and what do I always tell clients? You've got to persevere past the point where most people quit. and
So
then it
connect the dots
happens.
for me. What
Yeah.
caused the transfer to or the interest in Sandler from what seems like a totally different career?
Actually, it was my brother and I were. My brother and I had for years thought we should have our own business, have a business, whatever it was. And I was over here in Miami. He would come and visit Miami to see me. And we were both at that point where I was ready to stay in America. So there was a significant change required. He'd got to the point where his kids had all left for university and they were empty nesters. So he was kind of thinking that kind of transition think at the same time. And he happened to be a Sandler client of a guy we both know, Tom Neeson. So he was his company, even though he was based in the UK, the company was an American company based out of Dallas, and he used to fly to Dallas 3 or 4 times a year for training with Tom. And this was pre-Zoom. Like now, who'd get on a plane now to do that cross Atlantic? But this was pre-Zoom. This is 2009, 2008, and we started speaking about Sandler, and the rest is history.
So, like starting any business, it doesn't matter if it's Sandler or whatever it happens to be. It's a long, tough road. There's a very long ramp up period. There's a lot of stress. There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of sleepless nights trying to figure this out. But you did it, and you started to get some traction, and the business started to grow. But I got to believe that there was a certain amount of stress. There was a certain amount of angst, if there will, as you began that, if you will, as you begin that climb. How was that growth period affecting you personally, or maybe from a lifestyle standpoint?
Um, who is it? I think it's Elon Musk that says, um, as starting a business is like staring into the abyss and eating glass. Right? It was very stressful. It was a very stressful time. It was very demanding on my psyche, on my, and it's only in the rearview mirror that I can see it. Couldn't see it at the time. Extremely emotionally demanding. Plus, I was moving from a world that was consulting and high thinking into a world that was sales based. I mean, as you know, and if your listeners don't know, I want to tell you that there's not that if Sandler trainers are sellers first, and there isn't any that there. It's a very very rare animal that you find an exclusively training Sandler practitioner. We are sellers first, which means that we're prospectors first, right? So we're prospectors first, sellers second, and trainers third, and coaches. So I'm moving from a world where um, I've got a golden ticket into any boardroom essentially in the world, with a high, working for one of the largest companies in the world in an M&A capacity, and before that, working for the likes of PW and PwC. So I had a golden ticket into any boardroom I wanted to get into, to a world where nobody really wanted to speak to me. And I think we've got a colleague called Mike Jones. He calls sales an emotionally violent pursuit. So to step into this, I was psychologically and emotionally unprepared for it. I didn't know at the time because I was the master of everything, right? I
Sure,
had a
sure.
storied career, and at the time I thought I was Hercules. And I was emotionally and psychologically ill prepared for entrepreneurship and sales, and and my identity was put on the rack. It was like,
Hmm.
talk a martyr time. My identity was put on the rack. It was stretched and tested in a fairly brutal way. Um,
And it
and
can
it
have a
isn't
massive
until
personal impact on you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, now I only understand this now that I've got, and I'm sure we're going to get to a review of how I have over the past 2 years. reassessed my priorities and learnt so much about health. I didn't really know. So for the first 10 years, that level of stress, I'm a fairly A-type personality anyway. And I've run a career at a very fast pace for 30, what am I, 54, for 30, 35 years. I've been running a career at a very fast pace. That's my natural style. I kind of, I picked up those working class values. Some of them have really worked in my favor. Some of them have really worked against me. But, they were gifts from my parents that, and we all, what did David Sandler say? We're victims of other victims sleepwalking through life. So
Right.
we are, I was gifted or given the burden of, maybe it was a white elephant, gifted or carried the burden of an extremely high work ethic.
Sure.
And so, and I think, when you're in your 30s and your 30s, early 40s, that energy and that drive and that cortisol and that adrenaline manifests as a high level of activity. And then I wonder if it's age related, or I wonder if it was, I'm not quite sure. Maybe the body just tires of it. But that high level of cortisol and stress starts to
Sure.
take a real burden on physical health, emotional. There's an emotional strain that comes with that. And I think if you were to look inside my mind, you'd have seen. I think you'd have seen if you were to look inside my mind or even my sort of identity, you'd have seen it grinding up, and you'd have seen the turmoil. But of course, people can't look in the mind; they can only look
Sure.
at my physical body. But let me tell you, you'd have seen it there too.
Well,
And
and that's the reason we're talking today is,
that's the reason we're talking today.
well,
Yeah,
because I mean, if you take a look at Carlos's transformation, he went from being overweight, out of shape, working long hours. Many of us experience that in owning and operating a business. To now, he's lost 100 pounds over the last couple of years. He's running half marathons. He's pumping iron, making dramatic changes in almost every aspect of your life. So the question I have is, was there a moment or an aha or a realization that made you decide that you had to change?
no, there wasn't. I wish there was. A lot of people have asked me this question: what changed? Because did I learn something? Did I discover something? Not really. There was kind of a perfect storm of a few different things. Um, and there was a gradual realization. It would be wonderful to identify a trigger, because then everybody could go run out and find that trigger. For me, there wasn't a trigger. I'm sure for other people there might have been a trigger, but for me, there wasn't a trigger. I was determined in my identity to prove that the world was wrong. I was absolutely determined to prove that the laws of biology and physics don't really apply to me. This is how nuts I think people are, but certainly I was, or am. I'm sure I've got my own madnesses now. My wife would tell you I do still riddled with madnesses, but a few things happened all around the same time. I had a conversation with a guy that we both know, a guy called Jason Kaywood. So, Jason, when you listen to this, big call out to Jason in Utah. And Jason had done this was about 2.5 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. We were sat in Baltimore together, having been at a conference. And Jason was telling me, and I was starting to stack weight on. I mean, my body was really starting to. I've always been a little overweight my whole life. Then over the past 10 years, it had got quite a lot overweight. And at this point, when I'm having the conversation with Jason, I'm probably around about 260 pounds. And I'm 5'10". That's too heavy. And I was really feeling it. My confidence was feeling it, and my energy levels was feeling it. And I was having a conversation with Jason, and Jason was saying, hey, I'd done this great program. And Jason had lost some weight and was looking good. Jason's physically fit anyway. He's a big fella, Jason, and he's a muscular fella. I think he was a sports guy, an athlete guy. And he said he'd done this program called 75 Hard. I don't know if you've ever heard of this program, Jim. It's Andy Frisella's program. It's excellent. And I was listening along and nodding along, but of course I know better than everybody else, Jim. Of course I do. I know better than everybody else. So I was listening to it, and I was broadly interested, but not for me. I'll go out and earn some more money. And I was growing a business fast. And by the way, on reflection, I was thinking the other day, I spent so many years trying to buy my way into that confidence that I was really seeking. I was trying to buy my way out of my health challenges. I'm being too gentle with the word health challenges. I'm going to say weight challenges. So it's not very PC to call it that, but it is. That's where I was. Right. And I told myself a story. And I think it's a story of my time, by the way. I told myself a story that it didn't really matter my physical condition as long as I was rich enough. And I think that comes from being a child of the 80s. I mean, I was born early 70s, but I grew up in the 80s, 70s and 80s. And what was the flex of wealth in the 70s and the 80s? It was Chateaubriand, and it was brandy and overweight men in smoke-filled cigar bars with, and it was Dallas on TV and the Cattleman's Club, and that I honestly, this is relevant in my mind. What is a flex of health? Sorry, what is the flex of wealth or the flex of success? You go back to the 80s, and it was Dallas and Dynasty, an open-top Mercedes, and a cigar in one hand and a brandy balloon in the other. And typically heavyweight, almost exclusively men. And I honestly think that was printed. That was an imprint. It's very interesting, actually. You look maybe now, what a flex. Well, not even now. Go back a few years. For the last few years, a flex of success has been physical health.
Right.
Modern day entrepreneur, the flex is physical health, and really time. It's time freedom. That what's the flex of health today is time freedom and physical health. You only have to look at the billionaires. Find me a fat one, Jim. There aren't many. Jeff Bezos, these guys, Mark Zuckerberg, these guys are in tip-top shape. You go back to the 80s, and the moguls of the world were all overweight, all of them. And so there was a change in the world was happening at the same time. There was a change in me, and I'm sat in this hotel in Baltimore, and I'm listening to 75 Hard, and I'm still determined to prove to the world that the way it was in the 80s was better. And I was half listening. Then I came back to Miami, and I met a guy, one of my clients. He was in good shape. And I said, Warren, what the hell have you done, buddy? And he said, I did this program 75 Hard. And I went, well, wait a minute. That's two people telling me, like within the space of a few weeks. But I kind of forgot about it because, Jim, don't forget, I know better. Carlos knows better than everybody else.
Of course.
And then maybe another few months ticked by, and somebody else, I can't remember, there was a third, somebody spoke to me about 75 Hard. And I have a kind of rule. When the universe brings me something 3 times over, I'm like, okay, let's look at this. So I did the 75 Hard program. This really changed the way I felt, the way I started feeling about myself. What's very interesting about the 75 Hard program is it doesn't present itself as a health program, even though it is a health program. It presents itself as a mental toughness program. And I had never been foolish enough to think that my identity never reflected a healthy person. I mean, I'm not deluded. I wasn't deluded. I was, by this time, 287 pounds. And, there was no kind, you'd have to be absolute, you'd have to be an idiot to look at yourself in the mirror at 287 pounds and think healthy. So my identity was comfortable being not healthy, but my identity was uncomfortable thinking I wasn't mentally tough. And the way that 75 Hard resonated with me, and it might be exclusively me, is that it's presented as a mental toughness program.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah.
So
So
the
go ahead.
75 hard is what it's called?
It's called 75 hard, and it's like ridiculously tricky. You've got to become a master of time management and a master
Sure.
of discipline to deliver it, because it is a very demanding program. It isn't.
So you became aware of this program,
Yeah.
75 hard. So there was a point where you had a mindset shift. When did that occur? How did your mindset shift from I need to change to actually following through and doing something about it?
So I was looking at the 75 and I was watching. I'm a YouTube watcher. I don't know about you, buddy, but I'm a YouTube watcher. And I'm watching Andy Frisella, who's a strange cat, definitely a strange cat, talking about the 75 hard program. And he's got a very abrasive style. And he's talking about the 75 hard program. And I'm looking at my calendar and I'm thinking 75 hard, 75 hard. And I'm looking, and what you've got to do is you've got to do these ridiculous things every day for 75 days. And it's a lot of work. It's like, it's like a 2 hour commitment, probably a little more, 2.5 hours every day for 75 days. And you know what it's like running a business like ours, Jim. There's not a lot of time to go around, or rather, all time is filled. But what do you prioritize? Which is what I've realized since. But I'm thinking I haven't got time. So I'm looking at my calendar and I'm thinking, and there's an element of diet. There's an element, or rather, it's not really diet, but there's an element of nutrition. There's a lot of element of physical work, and there's some journaling work and some reading, and there's various elements to this program. But you got to do it every day. And I'm looking at my calendar, and he's playing on YouTube, and I'm looking, and I'm thinking, well, Thanksgiving's coming up, and then it's Christmas. So I'll start in January, right? Uh, how often does that conversation happen in somebody's head, right? Let's start in January. So I'm going to
Every
start in
year.
January, and completely blind or deaf to the caricature or irony of that, right? I'm going to start in January. And just at that time, Andy Frisella's voice comes out of the TV on YouTube saying, hey, if you're looking at your calendar thinking, can I do this? Don't bother. Just don't bother doing it. Don't bother doing it. You're not in the right mindset for it, because it's never going to be easy. Trying to find an easy time to do a hard program, like, stop being an idiot. And I looked up at the screen like a little guilty, and he was basically challenging my identity. You're not tough enough for this. And I thought, you know what, he's right. I'm just going to start. So I started.
Let me ask
And
you about that
yeah,
identity
yeah.
because I was curious about that. You alluded to identity. We talk about identity role. What personal beliefs did you have to challenge or let go of during that journey that you're still on?
Wow. I think I had to challenge a lot of personal beliefs, a lot of beliefs about what success meant, a lot of beliefs about our gifts and the purpose of those gifts. I had beliefs about, this is going to be an unpopular part of the show. I have beliefs about what a man's role is, what a father's role is, what a husband's role is. They're given to me by my father, for sure. Oh, by the way, a wonderful, wonderful human, who's still with us at 92 years old, fitter than you and me, Jim. Um, a wonderful father, wonderful husband, and wonderful man. But I had beliefs about what a husband is, what a father is, and what a man's job is, and about the prioritization of those roles versus prioritizing on my own personal time and personal health. Um, and I had beliefs about, I had beliefs about my value in the world that I didn't really want to question. There are those beliefs I think everybody has where we're comfortable in the belief and we don't want to look too closely at that belief, because I wouldn't like a world where that belief wasn't the case, right? So let's just leave that belief alone. Um, and riddled into those beliefs were that vision of Carlos, which is a provider, a and economically successful, and the economics being the priority. Beliefs that there was a cynicism as well, which again I think comes from those working class values. That, like, I remember once when Marcus, and you remember Marcus, Jim,
Mhm.
was first trying to get me to journal. And journaling was a part of this process, by the way. Journaling was a significant part of the development I've been on. But I looked at that idea of journaling through that working class cynic eye. So there was, there was a cynicism, a misprioritization of all things, a value of things, the value of myself. I had attached my identity, my self-worth, to my ability to generate dollars. Here's the madness: not even keep them. I'm comfortable spending them. I just wanted to generate them. It was attached to the generation, not even the wealth creation. So it falls over on so many different dimensions, including mathematics, right? It just falls over those beliefs. But though my identity was attached very squarely to my ability to generate dollars.
How much of that was rational and how much of that was head trash?
Beliefs. I think it all lives in your head, right? Whether it's trash or not, I don't know. I don't even know how to answer that question, but I'll answer a different question. How helpful was it? How helpful
Okay.
were those beliefs?
Okay.
And very unhelpful, very misguided, I mean, we know, because we teach our clients, Jim, that,
Sure.
our self-concept is so, our self-concept is an absolute director of how successful we're going to be in any of our pursuits, any one of them. But in particular in business, in particular in sales, you'll never earn a penny more than you think you're worth, right? So our self-concept is a driver, and all my self-concept was tied to these artificial measures rather than tied to anything that is permanent, a strong sense of self, irrespective of those role performances, irrespective of a strong sense of personal self-value, which I've discovered through these last 2 years. That to have that, I've rediscovered what I've been teaching clients for years, that that our identity sits quite separate from our behavior and it drives behavior,
Mhm.
but it's independent of our role performance.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fundamental to what we teach.
Sales professionals, you don't need more theory. You need transformation that drives performance. At Sandler, we go beyond the book. Our psychology based selling system, backed by behavioral science and 50+ years of proven success, gives your team data driven tools and a reinforcement strategy that ensures lasting change. See it firsthand. Crash a class today. Visit sandler.com/podcast. That's sandler.com/podcast. Sandler. Built for sales professionals who demand results.
By the way, we're speaking with Carlos Garrido from Sandler in Miami. He's sharing with us his transformation from an overworked, somewhat unhealthy business owner to an absolute Adonis in the
Ooh,
Sandler network.
that is where we're going for sure, but not there yet.
Adonis.
Yeah,
So,
Adonis.
Carlos, what lessons from your fitness and lifestyle journey have carried over to how you run your business?
Um, well, I was, doing this
You have
75
a
hard
successful
program.
business. Yeah.
So doing this 75 hard program, I started just walking every day. And I was walking every day, a couple of times a day, 45-minute walk. And then I started doing a little running in that walk. I started walking for 2 minutes, running for 15 seconds, and at nearly 300 pounds, running for 15 seconds. 52 years old, running for 15 seconds was no mean feat. But after a week of it, that was okay. So I ran for 30 seconds, and then I'd run for 45 seconds, and then a minute, always with a 2-minute walk in between. And over months of slow, steady improvement, and one day I just didn't walk anymore. I just didn't feel like it. Didn't feel like walking. Just felt like carrying on running. And I discovered a runner. I discovered running. And as I started to run and started to walk every day and be careful with my diet, and it was tiny, tiny steps, the weight just started to come off. My body really adapted quickly. It was amazing when you think that, you can do a little bit more every week. Every week. In 2 years, I have undone 20, 30 years worth of abuse. That's how fast the body and the mind, it's so plastic. That's how fast the body and mind can recover and reinvent itself. I'm a reinvention, physically and mentally, and energetically, a reinvention of Carlos. And actually, the same applied 3 or 4 years earlier. I applied exactly the same steps to my business. More than 3 or 4 years earlier than that. About 10 years ago, when I first started this business, we were out of money, out of luck, out of clients. We were dying. I mean, evicted, Jim. Evicted with 3 kids and 3 dogs, and evicted Christmas Eve. And that was the day I decided to stop just teaching it and start doing it the way we taught it, with behaviors, attitude, and technique. And that was when I decided to prospect every day. And I decided to journal everyday success, and started to really flex the techniques and work the system, our selling system. And I built from nothing a very, very successful Sandler business. Not the most successful, but, very, very successful Sandler business.
So I got to
Very
believe.
high energy, very high stress levels. And while my business was just taking off, my health was crashing. And then then 2 years ago, I just turned that same triangle, fueled by this re-understanding of myself, rather than thinking of this as a health challenge, but more of a mental toughness challenge, because that did fit with my identity. I didn't have an identity that said, Carlos, you're fit and healthy. But I did have an identity that said, Carlos, you are in control. Carlos, you are mentally tough. You are disciplined. I'd pointed that identity previously at business. I just decided 2 years ago to point that same identity of mental toughness at my health challenge, which means create a behavioral model that's going to, just like I've done with business.
Sure.
What's my behavioral model? Just like in business, my behavior model was this prospecting, what we call a cookbook, Jim. Here's the prospecting cookbook. From a health point of view, here's my health cookbook. Here's my health cookbook. And I run every day now. Now, do you need to run every day? Probably not, but I do. I need to run every day because I've decided that's my identity now. And you know what? There's loads of really healthy guys, way healthier than me, Jim, say to me, Carlos, you shouldn't run every day. You're probably right, but I like being this shape way more than being 300 pounds. So I'm just going to stick with it for now.
All right.
And my wife said to me the other day, she said to me, it was like I hadn't had a lot of sleep the night before. And I was about to go out on my run first thing in the morning. And she says to me, why don't you take today off? Today isn't going to make a difference. And I said to her, Carolina, today isn't going to make a difference, but running every day is going to make a difference. So it isn't that I need to run today, it's that I need to run every day. And, not taking a day off makes a difference. Mm-hmm. So, and, just like business, how would I take the friction out of my cold calls? I would sit on a Friday and write the list of every number I was going to ring the next week. That's taking the friction away. In exactly the same way, I go to bed every night and put my running stuff out every night, so that when I get up, there's no friction. My water bottle's full. My clothes are all there ready. My journal's all set out ready for the day, and I have made the health habits frictionless. I also went out and joined a really nice gym, which is a joy to be in. A Lifetime gym just near here, so that's really good. I started to take some classes, and I now work out most days. When I say workout, I mean lift heavy things.
Yeah.
Not very heavy, a little
Mm,
heavy.
sure.
My cookbook on the behavior corner of the triangle is running every day, a 45-minute walk in the evening with Carolina, and I try and lift heavy things 4 or 5 times a week.
So let me pick up
And
on
I
that. You said
fuel
something.
pretty well.
You
Fuel well.
you mentioned a couple of times the word triangle, and
Yeah.
as you know, the foundation of Sandler revolves around what we call the success triangle: behaviors, attitudes, techniques. How did your understanding of that success triangle, those core concepts, impact your approach to undertaking this massive transformation that you've been going through?
I was leaning hard on exactly the process that I went through 10 years earlier, or yeah, probably 8 years before this, when I decided to take a very serious revolutionary approach to my business, which is what we teach everybody. Get your behavioral model right, get your mindset right, and work good techniques. But the techniques actually aren't as important as the behavior and mindset, right? It's interesting, right? How many clients come to us, Jim, for the technique? Give us the technique, Jim. Give me the technique.
Almost all of them.
All of them come for techniques, and they
Right.
realize that over time, if they're smart, they'll realize it's really not to do with the technique. The methodology is important, but it's all about the mindset and the behaviors. So, whatever, 10 years ago, I pointed that model at my business, and with great success. Behaviors, mindset right. How do I work on my mindset for business? I developed my vision board. I developed I developed a journaling habit. I meditate. I do meditate. I do all that groovy woo woo stuff that old cynical Carlos, working class Carlos, would have looked at with disdain through squinted eye, right? And then employed our great Sandler selling techniques. Fantastic. But those weren't as important really as the other parts of the puzzle. So 2 years ago, as I'm in this evolution, same model, a fitness and fueling behavioral cookbook, fitness and fueling, and sleep. And then that was on the behavior corner. In the attitude corner, in the mindset corner, started to journal a lot about my health. Health became a much stronger part of my vision board, and I would meditate with my vision board every morning. Still do. And I really started to spend time thinking and reading about my health, about health. I started to dive in deep into some of the more philosophical thinkers around at the moment. This is quite a new movement at the moment. These like the Daily Stoics and these philosophies. That a lot of this is ancient wisdom. A
Sure.
lot of it really is. And there's a reimagining of masculinity at the moment, which I think is quite interesting, which has resonated a little bit. And I don't want anyone to think I'm running down the manosphere, because I'm not. But it's like there is a little reimagining of what it means to be a successful, valuable man and human, of course, and to be a good husband and a good father.
Sure.
And
Well,
then in the technique corner, hey, I started reading men's health magazines, and I started looking at YouTube videos and of people running, and Nick Bear doing like hybrid athlete stuff. And honestly, it's magic. I sit there, watch this stuff, and it fills my head with, that's how to do a Romanian deadlift. Who knew? What's that split squat all about? I'm filling my head with entirely new information, and I'm diving deep into the subject. Carolina gets so upset with me because she's like, what the hell are you watching here again? I will watch these 40-minute videos of just guys and gals running. And I'm fascinated by the technique of it all. I've dove in deep, Jim, into the behavioral model, the attitudinal model, and the techniques associated with great physical health.
I
And
think I
I
did
am
see
not
you
at
on
my
the
goal yet.
I
Sorry.
did see you walking through the drugstore on the cover of Muscle and Fitness magazine the other
There
day.
we are. One day, maybe. One day, maybe.
So we
Um,
know that this process that you're going, there is no start. Well, there is a start, but there is no end. It's an ongoing journey. But with that said, when you think about where you are now, are there any new goals you're setting, either personally or professionally, now that you've achieved the level of success you've achieved?
um, the
Or is it
more
just to
things change.
continue on that journey?
So the more things change, the more things stay the same, right? I have an ever increasing ambition for the business, which is, I'm achieving increasing goals. I don't on the business side ever set a goal that I never seem to hit the goal I set on business. For business, I always seem my reach always seems to exceed my grasp. I'm always like about $1 million ahead in my aspiration than what I achieve, but it is going up and up and up, and I'm building a very nice business. I have an extraordinary team, so thank you to my team. I am building something, and I'm determined too. It is. I am building. It's not. I might build. I am building. I'm building a business that that is going to deliver for me all that flex, all that time freedom, all that health, and all that economic success. So I'm building that business, and at the same time, I'm building my health, and I'm building my family, and I'm building my relationship with Carolina. And I've got these plates all spinning at the same time. On the health side, I've lost £100. I've still got another £15 to go to get to where I'd originally targeted. And let me tell you, Jim, it's going slow. This last £15 is stubborn.
Oh yeah, that's
What
the
what is it they
plateau.
say when you're 90% there, you're halfway done, right? I feel like I'm halfway done. I'm feeling like the first £100 has taken 2 years. I think these last 15 might take another year. They're certainly maybe not, maybe by year end, but it isn't falling off the way it was. Um, but then I don't think I'll be done even then. I will only be 50. I'm 54 years old. I'm a baby, right? I've got years ahead of me.
Right.
Um, but it is interesting. I go to the gym with my son Sebastian. He's 17 years old and essentially walking, talking testosterone, right? And he looks at the weight rack. He just has to cast his eye at the weight rack, and he seems to put muscle on. Whereas I'm there lifting heavy things and not really putting that much muscle on. But I'm going to do it. I am going to. The next phase is going to be me building a physique, more than losing weight, but actually building a physique. I take a lot of joy out of this. It is now a renewed identity. I don't want to say new identity. It's a renewed identity of this combination of economic success, business success in its broader terms, more than economics, but impact and team. So business success, physical success, success in my marriage, success as a father, and with my family. Um, it's multidimensional, and it's very of the now, right? It's very of the 2025s. This multi-dimensional measure of success. I think the 80s are long gone. Single pointed success
Sure.
measure.
Let me
Yeah.
ask you about business because knowing the number of business owners that you work with, I'm sure you've got some lessons learned that you can impart to them. But what advice would you give to a business owner who feels stuck and maybe overwhelmed by the idea of changing their their habits? What advice would you give to that business owner?
Um, so I don't think I would. I want to reframe it again, if I may. I don't think I would give anybody advice because I don't think I've got the right or even the authority. If you want health advice, there are people way better than me to give that. What I would offer, though, is a different perspective or a potentially different perspective. And I'd offer them my story. And my story was one where when I prioritize economics, health suffered. But when I prioritized health, economics wasn't impacted. If anything, the reverse. That my health has supported my economic success, whereas my economic success depressed my health. It was antagonistic to my health. And so it's just simply a question of what you prioritize. And isn't it easy, excusable even, to as a business owner who's fighting to make payroll, right? Fighting to pay the rent, fighting to keep customers happy. Of course, it's simple. We optimize for the today, we optimize for this week and this payroll. And so we prioritize making money. Of course, who wouldn't? You'd be insane. It would be delinquent to have a payroll bill come in at the end of the week, but you're out on the run. That's a delinquency. That's an abdication of responsibility. And so we're drawn into that vortex of earn more, sell more, get more money, get more clients. It's a vortex, that. And to pull out that vortex and actually prioritize, to put aside a time in the day, which is your time for health, and then dive into the business. My story is my impact in my business is supercharged by my increased confidence, energy. I think it's confidence, energy, and also and it takes the pressure off a little, off the day. It's really it's the substitution of a local optimum for a global optimum. If I'm going to locally optimize, then today I'm going to go and sell and close a deal. But if I'm going to globally optimize, then today I'm going to build my health habit. I'm going to remember that I run every day. I'm going to remember that I don't drink booze anymore. Booze was a big one, by the way. I'm going to remember that I go to bed at a good time and I sleep. I'm going to remember those things. That'll create a global optimum, not a local optimum. And I don't have to sacrifice the local optimum.
So
that's what I would say.
So Carlos, the question that I like to ask business owners or anybody that has gone through any kind of a traumatic change such as yours is this, and you might have to think about this for a minute, but what's one thing that you know now that you wish you had known before starting your journey? What do you wish you would have known then that you know now?
Are you talking 5 years ago, or are you talking when I very
I'm
first
talking
started
about
this health, like 2 years ago?
2 years ago when you started your transformation.
I don't actually think I would have changed anything because I'm really, really happy with what I've achieved in 2 years. So I don't know if I think I don't wish I'd have known anything. What I'll tell you is what I have learned. And what I've learned is
Fair enough.
you can achieve anything, like anything. And I've learned that I was a fit guy in a fat body. I was a extremely healthy guy, just wasn't living a healthy life. I think I told him, and I've learned how empowering it is to be healthy, to prioritize health. Way more empowering than prioritizing wealth. I hadn't realized that. Again, out of the 80s, I thought the most empowering thing you could be is rich. and I didn't. And now I realize the most empowering thing I can be is fit. And I didn't. That's something that actually probably would have, would it have accelerated me or not? I don't know. But if I think I have learned quite how empowered I feel by being fit, by running and lifting stuff, and just looking in the mirror and thinking, yeah, nice, good for you.
Yeah, lots of life lessons, lots of business lessons, lots of personal lessons. So Carlos, we need to wrap it up there. Congratulations on a remarkable journey. Thanks for joining us. Good luck as you continue to be a shining light for your clients and all of us on what's possible when you set your mind to a goal. Employ some of those tactics and strategies that we talk about in Sandler, the behaviors, the attitude, the techniques, any goal that you're determined to achieve. So I got one last question. What's next? A full marathon?
100%.
When, where, 100%. How?
I'm going to do the Miami 305. I'm going to do the three. It's not the Miami Marathon. It's slightly different. There's a 305. I prefer the route of the 305. I was going to do it this year, and I chickened out. And Carolina's been sick recently, as you know. My wife's been sick. She's been wrestling with cancer and winning the fight. God bless her. And that's an excuse. I should have run it this year. I told myself a story that I didn't. How terrible is that? Holding up Carolina's cancer as a shield as to why I didn't run that marathon. That's nonsense. For the watchers and listeners, that's utter nonsense. I should have run it this year. I didn't. I'm going to run a half marathon. I'm going to do the Jacksonville, I think, half marathon, which I think is November or December, and then I'm going to do the full in March.
The full is in March. That's the Miami one?
That's the Miami 305, yeah. The 305. Wow. You're going to come and do it with me, Jim?
I will be driving right along behind you, yes.
No, good for you. I ain't fast, buddy. Don't worry about it. My 5K time is just about 30 minutes. I am not fast, but I do 5K every day. Every day.
I will limp along with you.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Carlos. We appreciate your time. And gang, we'll see you next time on the How to Succeed podcast. Thank you.
The How to Succeed podcast is copyrighted by Sandler Systems, LLC, and protected by U.S. copyright laws. For more information on Sandler services, please consult with your local Sandler trainer or visit www.sandler.com.